34 years, but they say better late than never. You are now here, and we are so excited to host you. The competition has finally reached the Table Mountain. I would like, therefore, to thank our colleagues at the University of Pretoria, especially Professor Frans Viljoen, who is sitting somewhere there, and the colleagues at that university, including Professor Nkata Murungi, Dr. Lloyd Kuvea, who were acting directors at the time at the center when we were given this opportunity, and many other colleagues at the Center of Human Rights. Special welcome to my colleague, a long friend, Professor Ebenezer, who is with me here, Dorojaye, who is now the acting director of the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. And today here, we have about 65 to 70 teams competing. We'll confirm the total number by the end of, by midday today, from just over 20 countries. That too is subject to confirmation, to argue a case before panels of eminent scholars on the continent dealing with one of the most pressing issues of our time, which is about human mobility, in other words, migration, nationality, and statelessness, and the rights associated with this. Before I proceed, I thought I should tell you something about UCT. Some of you hear about UCT, but you don't know its history. Very briefly, the first lectures in law at UCT Law started in 1859. We are talking about 166 years ago. Now, that's when the first lectures in law started taking place here. It wasn't the University of Cape Town then, it was the College of South Africa. UCT was incorporated as a name in 1918, but before that, it used to be the University of the Cape of Good Hope. So it's an institution that has been there for a long time. In total, it goes all the way to 1828. So this is a newer campus. This building we are in is called Kramer Law Building in Middle Campus. The law faculty moved here somewhere around 2000 or thereabouts, but we have occupied various campuses before. As we speak, we have more than 200 academic and support staff in the faculty, with a population of students numbering 1,200 to 1,300, half of whom are postgraduate students, and just over half, I would say, undergraduate students. We have postgraduate specializations in commercial law, public law, and private law, and we graduate between 20 to 30 doctoral candidates every year. So, as today has been such a beautiful day, the plan was, and we selected this week very carefully because we thought out of all the weeks, the one that had sunshine, at least on 2 days, was this week. The plan was all students stay on upper campus and then you walk down here. It's a nice walk, but I'm sure some of you did not do that walk. You took the buses. But try it on one of these days that you walk down and probably up during the day. In the evenings, we suggest that you don't do that. And when you do, you take the walk, please do so in groups of, 3, 4, 5. This is an important event, and we are happy to be part of the network of faculties that have hosted it, to promote a culture of interaction between students across universities on the continent before they even graduate. And with this number of students that we have here, we are adding to a generation of law students who have participated in the Moot for a long time. So I hope that you will find this enriching, this Moot experience, that you make a lot of friends, And some of these friends, you remember them for the rest of your life. We are very glad to be starting this Moot with a conference which gives us an opportunity to engage on the issue that has been set for you, the problem that has been set for you, with experts who have researched into it for many years and who are willing and here to share with us some of their views on the topic. We hope that it just opens a discussion. It's a very compressed program. We want to keep to time. And so please engage with these experts, but be mindful that you can engage with them after the conference during break time as well. So I would like to thank the organizers of the conference. It's safe. I need to find the name of our organizer, the coordinator of the conference, Cheryl Punaka, who worked very hard with the team at Pretoria and to a limited extent for us to organize this conference. I would like to thank people who are going to present on the conference, experts from around the continent who are going to speak with us, both in the first and second parts of the conference, the second part focusing on human rights education in law faculties in Africa. There are some practical matters, as I said, to start with. This is Kramer Row building. So this is the biggest lecture theater we have, and this is where we teach most of the LLB classes here. So it occupies where I am, level 1. At the top there is level 2. So if you exit from this point, you're on level 2. If you exit from that point, you're on level, here level 1, level 2 is up there. The quad where we'll have lunch, teas and whatnot, the opening ceremony as well, is on level 3. The entrance that you use from the top, from the mountainside, is level 4. Then there are 2 other levels to the top. So when you see on the program, Kramer 2A, Kramer 3 something, it indicates the level at which you are, then you have to find the classroom where you're supposed to be, all the way up to 6. On level 3, we don't have classrooms at all. When you exit this level 2 to All Africa House, on your left, you will find economics building. There's a School of Economics. That's where the French and Portuguese teams will spend their preliminary rounds today and tomorrow. There are 4 venues there, and they will be on level 1 of the economics building. You will enter through level 2, and then we'll go 1 level down to find 4 venues in that building. It's just about 50 meters from here. This is middle campus, and so we have upper campus where the students are putting up, and lower campus down here, and that this place where the university is the main campus, and it is in Rondebosch. It's a university town. It's an open campus, and so the good thing is that anyone can come in and out of this campus. But the danger is that some people can sneak in who don't belong to the university. I'm mentioning this to be mindful of your possessions. When you leave them in public areas, you have to leave them with someone you know around. Do we understand that? Yeah. Otherwise, it remains for me to thank an incredible team of people who have worked very hard to get us here. From the University of Pretoria, we had the full support of an entire team at the center, and in particular for this Moot, led by Dr. Ahmed Sayed, whom everybody seems to know. Sayed is his last name. Ahmed is his first name, but he is popularly known as Sayed. Since last year, we've worked very closely together. We didn't have the experience, they had the experience, and so we really appreciate the work they have done to support us. From our side, this was a team effort. At first, I thought this is a faculty thing, but it involved everybody in the university, all the way top to down. And so we've collaborated with colleagues from all sectors in properties and services, in the finance, in our faculty office, in our finance office, and in the dean's office. I would like to highlight in particular someone you have seen the name, Ms. Faiza Mohammed, who has worked so hard to get us here. We have colleagues from the IT department as well who have worked so hard on that or with us. Our team, organizing team led by Ben Cronin, Ibsam Ahmed, and Professor Johan Harting did the great work for the considerable part of the year to get us here. We've been joined by a team of volunteers, exciting group of people who have really showcased their skills to manage and organize events, led by Kaylin Debrin. I don't know where she's here. She's busy organizing. Most of you saw her yesterday, and student leaders, other student leaders, such as Sanele Sibanda. We also don't have just students from here, but also I would like to recognize students from the Faculty of Humanities who have been especially helping us with French and Portuguese. I would like to emphasize that we will try to stick to time. So I hope I will lead by example. But what this means is that we have instructed our volunteers to be very strict with time. So if the courts start at 9, you're supposed to be there 10 minutes to, at least students, 20 minutes to 9. You fill in your forms and all of that. By 9 o'clock, we start and we end on time. So the presiding officers have to end the proceedings on time. Especially today, we have a very tight program. We expect the premier to arrive at 5 p.m. They don't miss their time. So they will be here 5 p.m., which means everybody has to be seated in the quad by 5 p.m. There will be a short time for students to go and change if you want to put on the wonderful colors from your country. It will be a very short time. Within 1 hour, you need to go up and back, come back very quickly. There will be some good music to prepare for, so I hope you will not wear shoes that will prevent you to move around at some point in the evening. I think with these remarks, I would like to introduce my colleague, Professor Ebenezer Durojaye, to make some remarks.
Thank you, Professor Chiwa. Good morning, everyone. And you're welcome to this Moot, the 34th edition of the Moot. It has a very long and rich history for some of us that has been following. First of all, I would just like to thank Professor Chiwa and the team at UCT for agreeing to host this year's Moot, for their support, collaboration during the past few weeks. We are really very grateful, Prof. Thank you for you and your team. And also for some of us coming from far and near, welcome to UCT. Welcome to the 34th edition of the Moot Court competition. And I know before you got here, some of you must have passed through one kind of competition, selection process or another. So the fact that you are here, you are all champions. I think you should clap for yourself. So the Moot starts tomorrow. As the Moot starts tomorrow, I want to encourage you to imbibe the spirit of the Moot. What do I mean by imbibing the spirit of the Moot? I mean, pass through the Moot. Don't just pass through the Moot, but let the Moot also pass through you. And what do I mean? A few years ago, not too long ago, I was honored and privileged to participate in the Moot as a young student representing the University of Lagos in Nigeria. And that Moot, my team did not win. Neither was I selected as the best oralist. But I imbibed the spirit of the Moot. You know, after that Moot, it was a life-changing experience for me. The first time I was coming into contact with international human rights. And since that time, I became hungry to know more. I never gave up. I know that I didn't win. My team did not win, but I imbibed the spirit of the Moot. And I fast forward today, the 30th day of June, 2025. Here I am, standing before you by the special grace of God, making this opening remark in my capacity as the acting director of the Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria. And who says you cannot do better than this? The same year I participated in the Moot, another very brilliant young man participated with me. He was representing the University of Pretoria. His name is Dari Taidi. His team did not win. He was not selected as one of the best oralists, but he imbibed the spirit of the Moot. And ladies and gentlemen, today, he's one of the judges at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, representing South Africa. And who says you cannot do better than that? So, colleagues, I want to urge you as the Moot starts tomorrow, give your best, go, fight, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't aim to win at all costs. That is not the spirit of the Moot. The spirit of the Moot is to experience the Moot, to learn, to gain. And I'm looking forward that the next few years to come, some of you will find you in highly places, in the African human rights system, either at the court, commission, at the expert committee, or even at the UN level. And who says you cannot aim to do that? So I'm encouraging you as the Moot starts tomorrow, give your very best, meet with people, mix. The whole essence is for you to interact with people, meet new people. These people can change your life for the few years to come. So make sure that you really integrate, you meet with people. You learn, the most important thing, learn. When you win, be gracious in victory. When you lose, don't lose the lessons. And this is very, very important. Above all, imbibe the spirit of the Moot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Durojai. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker for today is Justin McDermott from the IOM. But to give him a proper introduction, I'm going to call up Professor Nkatha Murungi, Assistant Director at the Center for Human Rights.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, we're going to have to do better than that to keep the spirit for a full week. So good morning. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the keynote speaker. It's an honor for me to do this. Just before I say, I just want to follow on Professor Durojai and say, this is a fantastic opportunity. If you're here as a student who is going to be participating, we are alumni of the Moot, a majority of us. Me too. How many years ago? I would not say how many years, but just to say, whatever you have a chance of a lifetime, frankly speaking. I was saying yesterday, I'm still in touch with the people that I met at the Moot in Addis in 2006, right? Yeah, some of you were just born. Okay, I have. It's a high pleasure for me to introduce the speaker, the keynote speaker of our morning today. As you may have seen, the context in which we are engaging with this conference, particularly in this year and in recent years, is of particular interest. And so we are very honored that to contribute to this conversation this morning, we have Mr. Justin McDermott, who is the Interim Chief of Mission in South Africa and Sub-Regional Director of IOM. He's been in this capacity, in this role, since August 2024. Justin served as a Senior Regional Policy and Program Coordinator, deputizing the Regional Director at the IOM Regional Office in Eastern Horn of Africa, 2019 to 2024, and in his role championed mobility dimensions of regional integration and oversaw the regional strategy, policy, and programs. Drawing on over 20 years' experience in the migration and humanitarian development and peace-building field, he has been part of the transition team for the Director General, for the DG Amy Pope in preparation for assumption of the role in 2023. Justin has served as the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus Advisor in IOM in 2018 to 2019, and previously worked with IOM in Bangladesh and Zimbabwe. So in his role as Senior Advisor to the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General, as well as the Swedish and Bangladeshi chairmanships of the Global Forum on Migration and Development, he was at the heart of efforts to get migration into the 2030 agenda and IOM into the UN system, and the conception of the Global Compact for Migration. And prior to returning to IOM, he served as the Deputy Director at the Division of Migration and Asylum Policy, Ministry of Justice in Sweden. He's a Swedish national, and he's a scholar in development studies from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Justin will be joining us online, and we are once again privileged and honored to welcome him as the keynote speaker this morning. Is he? Oh, are we fine? Oh, he's already.
The technician and him tell us.
Okay.
Can I go?
Yes.
Good morning, colleagues. Professor Chirwa, Dean Faculty of Law, University of Cape Town. Professor Duraje, Acting Director, Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria. Professor Murungi, Assistant Director, Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria. And Professor Usang Asim, Associate Professor and Senior Researcher, Children's Rights Project, Dullah Omar Institute. Dear colleagues, all protocol reserved. It's a great honor to address you all, both in person and online, at the 34th Christopher Heyns African Human Rights Moot Court Competition, the largest and most prestigious event of its kind on the continent. I only wish I could be there with you physically to engage in this vital conversation on human rights, particularly on the human rights of migrants. Migration is an intrinsic part of human history. It drives prosperity, enhances lives, and enriches cultures. Yet it is too often manipulated by criminal networks, corrupt systems, and harmful narratives. In recent times, migration has been overshadowed by xenophobic narratives, prejudices, and false narratives, leading to attacks on migrants and on their identities. At IOM, we adopt an inclusive definition of a migrant: any person who moves away from their usual place of residence, whether within a country or across borders, temporarily or permanently, and for various reasons. This includes persons whose particular types of movement are legally defined by international laws, such as migrant workers, as well as those whose status or means of movement are not specifically defined, such as international students. Currently, there's about 281 million international migrants who've crossed international boundaries. Most migration is safe, regular, and regionally focused, driven by opportunities and livelihood. However, media narratives often distort this reality, portraying migrants as job stealers or criminals, fueling xenophobia and policies that deny migrants their basic rights and societies of a powerful source of socioeconomic development. In Africa, migration is shaping societies economically, socially, culturally, and politically. In fact, intra-African migration is growing, with a 14% increase since 2015, and most migrants move within their own sub-regions. In this context, regional integration holds huge potential for expanding markets, attracting investments, and transforming the economies of Africa. Importantly, women make up nearly half of all international migrants in Africa, as they do elsewhere in the world. Whilst the majority move through regular legal channels, those moving irregularly are often the most vulnerable, facing exploitation, abuse, and arbitrary detention. In Southern Africa, migration is mixed and complex. Refugees, asylum seekers, migrant workers, trafficked persons, and unaccompanied children often travel together, sometimes through 5 or more countries. Their journeys may begin legally, but become irregular due to shifting circumstances. These migrants are driven by a mix of factors: economic hardships, the need for protection, access to health care or education, environmental hazards, the search for jobs, or political instability. According to the UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs, as of mid-2020, there were around 6.4 million international migrants in the region, less than 1.7% of the total population. South Africa hosts the largest number, 2.9 million, followed by the DRC and Angola. Migrants contribute significantly to host countries. In 2019, Southern African nations received an estimated 7 billion in remittances. While some may view this as money leaving the host economy, the reality is that migrants spend far more within host countries. Yet remittance costs remain high, averaging 14%, well above the Sustainable Development Goal target of 3%, thus robbing hard-earned money from the families of migrants. Negative narratives often suggest migrants are undeserving of rights. While legal distinctions exist, this perception is misleading. Let's turn to the international human rights framework. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights outlines 30 articles of fundamental rights and freedoms. These rights are inherent and inalienable, not guaranteed by states, but safeguarded by them. The UDHR applies to all human beings, regardless of their nationality, place of residence, gender, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status. 9 core international human rights treaties apply to migrants, whether in regular or irregular situations. In the SADC region, Malawi, Lesotho, Mozambique, and the Seychelles are parties to all 9. South Africa, our host government, is party to 8, but has not signed the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and Members of their Families. International human rights law recognizes a hierarchy. Citizens enjoy the fullest rights, followed by lawfully present migrants, and then those in irregular situations. The International Covenant on the Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and the International Convent on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICESCR, have clauses obliging state parties to guarantee the rights of all persons unequivocally, including migrants, without discrimination. The ICCPR reserves for citizens the right to vote and restricts the right to freedom of movement within the territory of the states to citizens and others who are lawfully within its jurisdiction. It also contains a broad non-discrimination clause. ICSCR limits the rights of non-nationals by allowing developing countries to determine to what extent they provide the economic rights to non-nationals. I mentioned earlier the transformative potential of regional integration. In this context, it also includes a progressive expansion of rights closer to those of citizens within the economic community. As I mentioned at the beginning of my talks, migration is more nuanced than what's painted on the media or in public discourse. Being in an irregular situation may be a situation a migrant is made to be. For example, in the case of a trafficked person, they may not have consented to the irregular movement, or even when they do consent, they may have been deceived about the job they were promised for and end up in a situation of exploitation. Without proper screening, this trafficked migrant may end up in detention as they are in a country irregularly. The international human rights law obliges states as duty bearers of rights to respect, to protect, and fulfill human rights. To respect means states must refrain from interfering with or curtailing the enjoyment of human rights. To protect means state must prevent other individuals, companies, and other non-state actors from interfering with the enjoyment of human rights, and where necessary, to investigate such violations, prosecute the concerned actors, and provide redress to the victim. And to fulfill means states must take positive action to facilitate the enjoyment of basic human rights. As duty bearers, state must have laws, policies, and procedures to enable rights holders to enjoy and exercise their rights. As a migration agency, IOM stands as a supporter of the primary duty bearers to ensure the fulfillment and upholding of migrants' rights and to contribute to ensuring their exposure to risk and violence are reduced and redressed. IOM applies a rights-based approach in its programs. It shifts the focus of the organization's projects from the needs of vulnerable, marginalized, and discriminated groups to the respect, protection, and enjoyment of their rights. IOM seeks to analyze and tackle the root causes underlying discrimination, violations of human rights, and social injustice. Refocusing from needs to rights means that the excluded, marginalized, and discriminated groups are recognized as holders of rights that can be claimed. We therefore applaud the Center for Human Rights of University of Pretoria and University of Cape Town for their consistent approach in keeping Professor Christof Heyns' legacy on the legal scholarship, pragmatic policy, and deep humanity through hosting the convergence of human rights discourses. I'm humbled by your continuous efforts to contest government policy from human rights perspectives. IOM remains steadfast in our support to deliberation of this kind. I wish you a successful event, and also I'd like to use this opportunity to bid South Africa farewell, as I will continue my journey to East and North Africa, Middle East and North Africa, excuse me. It certainly has been a wonderful journey in this part of the region. Once a migrant, always a migrant. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Justin. We really appreciate your contributions. And we're also very appreciative that you were able to make it today, even though it's online. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be having a comfort break. Hello? A comfort break in just a few, but before we head off, I'm just going to call upon Prof. Chiro, who has some announcements that we'd like to make.
Thank you once again to our keynote addresser this morning for highlighting in a very precise way, but quite comprehensive at the same time, the status of migrant rights, both at the level of international law, but also within the region. We have saved some time, which means that we continue the registration just after now. I just need to make two announcements. The first is that I didn't say anything about where the lavatories are. So this building has two sets of lavatories from level 2. I would encourage you to start from level 2 all the way to level 6. Next to Crema 2B at the back, you will find the female lavatories all the way up. So each level you'll find them. That's for female. Diagonal, opposite in a diagonal sense. If you remember mathematics, in the other corner will be for male toilets from level 2, level 3, level 4, levels 5 and 6, except of course level 4, which is gender neutral. So level 4 is gender neutral. The rest in that corner is male toilets. There's an issue with money registration here. The university has moved way forward. We don't accept cash. So when we said we have dollars coming in from all over Africa, they said, this is something we can't handle. What is dollars in cash? Where do we put it? Do we have security? It's a very difficult thing for us. So what we are trying to do is to organize transport during the week for team leaders to go and deposit the money at the bank. So we'll organize that and we'll be announcing that. So don't panic about it. You will get your money deposited. We'll continue registration now, but please also remember that there's tea. So if you don't register now, we'll register again another break. So please be here by 10. Yeah, try to come back by 10 o'clock, 10:05, then we start again. Thank you so much.
Laptop mic. Okay, you can go. I need to get it. Say next. Up your pictures now. Checking to see if we have someone in the mic. Yeah, a little bit. So long as the one is there with them. Yeah, that's the. And still nothing.
No, remember, things must fix as well. You can hear it. Going.
Okay, you can hear. We're talking now. So it should hear. I'm speaking with the teams now. It should hear. It's on. What this should also pick me up. Testing 1, 2. Speak from that side.
Yeah, speak from.
From that piece. Testing 1.
Hi, everyone. We're gonna start back up in 5 minutes. So if you're in the room already, if you can start to take your seat, and if anyone is still outside, if they can make their way back in, we'd be so appreciative.
All right. Good morning. Welcome back. We should be starting in a minute, so please take your seat. Please note that the next session has speakers in French. So the English speakers who were complacent this morning, you have to take the mic very seriously now. So sit in a place where you have the headphones. We have so many here. We are sitting like in a proper classroom where you avoid the front seats. I can tell you even our Senate sits here. So the professors also sit the way you're sitting. There's no difference in behavior. So please try to come closer here to take the headphones. I think there's even a speaker in Portuguese. Yeah, there's even a speaker in Portuguese. So you really need to take the headphones seriously. We'll start in a minute.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Everyone coming in, feel free to take your seat. We're about to start our first, about to enter into our first moderated session. Okay, so our presenters under this session have written papers under the theme Statelessness and the Exploration of the Durability of Citizenship.
L'examen de la pérennité de la citoyenneté et du droit.
Statelessness and the Exploration of the Durability of Citizenship and Migrants' Right to Political Participation and Protest. The session will be moderated by Associate Professor Usang Maria
Maria Assim.
Apologies. Our moderator for this session is Associate Professor Usang Maria Assim. Prof. Assim is a senior researcher in the Children's Rights Project at the Dullah Omar Institute. She undertakes research and teaching responsibilities at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. She works in close collaboration with the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, the committee's partners, and other civil society organizations involved with children's rights in Africa and globally, contributing towards the fulfillment of the committee's mandate. Among others, she is a member of the Advisory Council of the Independent Expert for the United Nations Global Study on Children Deprived of Liberty, and is a council member of the Global Campus of Human Rights, a network of over 100 member universities playing a leading role in human rights and democratization, education, research, and advocacy. I'm going to allow Associate Professor Assim to introduce our presenters, but let's welcome our presenters as well as our moderator.
Thank you so very much, and good morning again.
Muito obrigado a todos, uma vez mais. Bom dia.
So for this session, we're going to have 4 presenters. And in the interest of our time, I'm just going to announce who the presenters are and their topics. And they are going to go in that order to make their presentations. Once the presentations are done, we'll then open up for the question and answer session. I'd like to implore you at this stage, please pay attention as you listen, and whatever questions you may have, comments or feedback, the only rule is please try to keep them concise and clear. That would help us on both sides to be very clear going ahead and also to manage our time properly. So under this theme, the first paper will be presented by Gloria Egwono Aibadon and Itunu Kolade Fasheyi from Caleb University, Lagos, Nigeria. And the topic is Beyond Borders and Barriers, Intersectionality of Rights in Migrant Protests. Next, we will have Daniel Rukweza from Makerere University in Uganda. The paper is titled, Are We Less Human? Reflections on the Right of Migrants to Participate in Civic Spaces. This will be followed by a presentation put together by Prof. Wessel Leroux and Brian Chihera on the topic, Expatriate Voting Rights, 2 extreme views from within the Southern African Development Community. Our presenters are from the University of the Western Cape here in South Africa. And finally, we'll have a doctoral student, Arnaud Kofi, from Université Paris-Nanterre, whose topic is as follows in French. So please get yourselves ready like we have already been warned. Those of us who are, you take it for granted that it's all going to flow in English. This time you need to pay attention to Arnaud's presentation. Discours de haine et droit des étrangers, lecture consequentialiste de la liberté d'expression offerte aux étrangers. And he'll be joining us online to make his presentation. Thank you very much. Let's welcome the first presenters.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Itunu Kolade Fasheyi. I'm here with my colleague, Gloria Igbadon. We are both from Caleb University, Nigeria. I'll be presenting a paper titled Beyond Borders and Barriers, Intersectionality of Rights in Migrant Protests. In our paper, we established the fact that migrants are constantly faced with systemic challenges and layered vulnerabilities that tend to limit their access to fundamental human rights. We established the fact that these rights are fundamental to them by the fact of them being human. We also explored the intersectionality. We also explored the intersectionality of rights and how they influence migrant protests. We looked at protests as a good tool for social change. We also established the fact that the right to protest of migrants are fundamental human rights, which should ordinarily be protected. Our research focus is limited to African migrants living in the UK, the USA, and Canada. In our research reveals the fact that more people have moved out of their countries of origin, countries of ordinary residence. And we established these facts using the 2024 IOM World Report, which reveals that about 281 million international migrants are in the world. Our theoretical framework for this research is the main theoretical framework of our research is the push and pull theory. We looked at this theory and we're able to link this theory to our research. We looked at its effects and how the theory affects decisions to migrate, especially as regards African migrants. Intersectionality of rights, which is the main focus of our research, was also discussed in detail. We looked at how identities like race, gender, migrant status, class, and several factors affect migrant protesters. We also look at how these identity factors intersect with the unique rights of migrant protesters and form some unique form of marginalization for them. We looked at how solidarity networks and allied factors influences migrant protesters. Our research also, we were able to close up barriers between the protesters within this migrant protest. We looked at how several factors tend to affect how they carry out this protest. In all, our research also, we looked at the legal barriers migrant protests, especially those of African descent in UK, US, and Canada face that are peculiar to them. We looked at and we also reviewed several cases that cut across these three jurisdictions of UK, US, and Canada. In particular, we discussed the Stansted 15 case. We looked at HT versus Secretary of State for Home Department. We looked at Logan versus Ontario. We also discussed the Moot case in US. We established the facts from these cases and several others in our research that African migrants, particularly, even though they are together in protesting within these networks, there are various intersections that affect them within and outside the group. In particular, the case of HJ versus HJ and HT, these two migrants are from Cameroon and Iran, but particularly they were, because of their sexual orientation, they were discriminated against, and then even though they were asylum seekers, their sexual orientation was used against them. And it is peculiar to note that the courts, however, allowed their appeal, holding that sexual orientation should not affect rights that migrants ordinarily should have. And then the other case that we also discussed in our paper, the Stansted 15 case, was reported in 2021. In that case, a group of 15 migrants, a group of 15 activists protested the deportation of African migrants, particularly from Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. There was a plan to deport them, and there was a protest at the airport to stop that deportation. At the end of they were sentenced, but on appeal, the UK Court of Appeal quashed the conviction, holding that their protest, even though that their protest did not meet the threshold of endangering airport security, and then that it was the Aviation and Maritime Security Act 1990 that was used against them was inappropriate, and they were freed, they were discharged and acquitted. We looked at several other cases that we tend to link the intersectionality of rights of migrants' protests, and my colleague will take up from here to discuss the Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so our research findings, is a very interesting one because, like my colleague has said, we employed the mixed methodology where we had the desktop research analysis or the desktop research and the empirical method. Now, in utilizing the empirical method, we use qualitative analysis as well as descriptive statistics so that we were able to engage African migrants in the UK, in Canada, and the United States. Here are some of our some of the minor findings that we had. Our research revealed that we have more people within the age of 31 to 40 as migrants. Our research also discovered that we discovered that majority of these migrants resides in the United Kingdom. Now, our research also revealed that only 22.9% reported protesting their victimization. And that's actually a very low number. Active involvement in migrant protests is low, 17.4% from our findings. Then also, we had this response of non-applicability when it comes to migrant protests. What this connotes is that there is this disconnect or disempowerment, among migrants. On the forms of protests, our research discovered that the method for protest is majorly online activism. And what flow from that is that there are some challenges experienced by these migrants. And these challenges are basically freedom of expression, which is 20.2%, legal representation, 12.8%, protection from discrimination, 20%. Now, on how does the use of protests empower migrant community? From our findings, our findings reveal that among those who specify the need for specific support during protests, the support that they majorly need is legal aid, which is 11%, media coverage, 10%. Our respondents believes that allies should primarily provide support. 27% of them are of this view, and they believe that this is one way the voices of migrants can be amplified. Our key findings: intersectionality and protests as social change. What our research reveal is that there are layered grievances. Layered grievances drive protests, okay? And there's systematic exploitation which reveals injustice that is intensified through the intersection of class, race, legal status, and all that. On migrant rights to protest, our research revealed that there is limited engagement. Like I said, protesters during victimization incidents, protesters would rather want to do online activism or online protests. Then there are systematic challenges. It was discovered that even within migrant groups, we had some form of underrepresentation and systematic exclusion. Our research also revealed that there are ways that migrant group or migrant protesters can be empowered. 11% of our respondents believe that there is need for legal aid, and there is also need for intersectional solidarity and organization. Our recommendation: this research recommends that in handling the issues of intersectionality of rights in migrant protests, there is need to adopt an intersectional approach, having an intersectional view about it. When we talk about intersectionality, we're talking about how these rights, how issues or intersectional issues like race, like class and status, intersect with other rights. Like when you're looking at the rights for freedom of expression, discrimination, there's always that convergence. We're recommending that there's need to promote solidarity and allyship between various migrant groups. There is need for public awareness on the intersectionality of rights, and also public awareness on the difficulties encountered by migrants. There's also need for legal and institutional framework reform. And also from our findings, we are recommending that there is access to legal aid and remedies for migrant protests. In conclusion, I'll just quickly read out our conclusion. The intersectionality of rights in migrant protests presents a complex and multifaceted challenge that requires a nuanced and inclusive approach to address the needs and experiences of migrants. Through the intersectionality lens, this paper analyzed how migrant experiences are shaped by a complex interplay of identity factors, which creates some form of multiple vulnerability. And understanding that the right to protest should not be a privilege of citizens, but a reflection of shared human dignity will be rewarding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria and Netunu, for keeping to time. Daniel, you're next. I'm aware that your presentations have been given to organizers. May I request, should you need them to go to the next slide, just alert them so that they can do that and it will ease your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And good morning to all of us. My name is Ruhweza. Ruhweza in the language that I speak means to see clearly. You could maybe argue that it could also mean that I have a vision or I am visionary. My question to you who are listening to me is, what is your name and what does it mean? Why do I ask this question? I ask the question of identity regarding our names because they might give us an idea of who we are and where we come from. There are two reasons given about the origins of Ruhweza. The first is that our roots as the Bantu-speaking peoples of Uganda come from somewhere in Cameroon or Nigeria. There is another view that we are people who can trace our roots amongst the Ngoni migration from this very place, South Africa. And so the Ntu for the Bantu-speaking people can be traced in Zambia, Malawi, and other spaces. In essence, it's not enough for me to call myself a Ugandan. I probably are better off calling myself an African. But most importantly, I am a human being. Hence, the paper that I am going to talk to you about. Are we less human? Reflections on the right of migrants to participate in civic spaces. If you are familiar with Ubuntu, I am because you are. I am because we are. You probably know that we derive our sustenance from one another. Why then is it that fellow Africans seem to treat each other with as much disdain and disunity as we are going to see? At the back of your mind, please hold the theoretical framework, third world approaches to international law, from which we can extrapolate some ideas. Number two, I'd like to give you an example of someone who is the prospective mayor, Democratic Party's presumptive nominee for the mayor position in New York City, somebody called Zohran Mamdani. Zohran is 33 years old. He was born to Professor Mahmoud Mamdani, who I'm sure some of us are familiar with, and his mother is Nira Maya. He was born in Kampala, Uganda, but is able to campaign and stand for public office in the United States of America. Princess Opeyemi Bright is mayor of Barking and Dagenham in United Kingdom. She's only 29 years old. Jason Jackson is a Nigerian-born British politician who is mayor of Islington, London, UK. Those three examples should give us, hopefully, an idea of what I want to talk about. So what then is the issue? The question of whether migrants are less human strikes at the core of contemporary debates about political participation and democratic inclusion. Across the globe, civil strife, natural disasters, wars, and globalization have forced human beings to move from one place to another. So since time immemorial, we have had people changing, and indeed host communities have been changed positively or negatively as a result of migration. The most celebrated army general from France, what is his other name? Nelson? Who can remind me? Nelson. Huh? Anyway, we are going to get there. One of the most celebrated French generals of his time are probably said to have come from the Corsica Islands, somewhere there. The United States, Australia, New Zealand, Palestine are examples of places where migrants have indeed taken over and become forces in their erstwhile host communities. However, the experience of migration and settlement has not been uniformly positive, and in many societies, migrants find themselves in what scholars call a political predicament, in that they are excluded from meaningful political participation in both their countries of origin and their host states. Case in point, East Africa. We are more aware of our nationalities in spite of the East African Treaty. We are deporting people in Tanzania. We are closing borders in Rwanda, declaring persona non grata in Uganda, denying citizenship to those who are born in our countries because of political expedience, and refusing to grant national identification cards in countries like Uganda because we suspect that people come from neighboring nations. This exclusion, therefore, raises fundamental questions about the relationship between political participation, human dignity, and democratic legitimacy in an era of unprecedented global displacement. And when we talk about global displacement, I have in mind the fact that the world is VUCA. It is volatile, it is uncertain, it is complex and ambiguous. And I think COVID-19 showed us that very well. The guiding question, therefore, is whether refugees and other migrants have inalienable political rights that must be taken into consideration by their host state democracies. This inquiry, therefore, takes on a certain urgency in light of the reality that refugees are individuals who, owing to well-founded fear of persecution, are outside their country of nationality and are unable to avail themselves of that country's protection. Yet, this protection is generally purchased at the cost of political voice, an essential element of human agency and dignity. So you get to stay in this place as long as you do not raise your voice and express your views. And I think you've seen what has happened to those of the world who went to study in Harvard University. The tension between granting asylum and refusing political membership generates a kind of political statelessness that endures despite of one having a refugee status that is legal. This is the experience of millions of displaced persons globally who are irretrievably barred from democratic life while putting down profound roots in their host societies. They are building, they are running businesses, running schools, etc., but they are not allowed to participate in the democratic life of those communities. My argument, therefore, is migrants have an inalienable right, which should not be trampled upon or ignored, but rather they should be given spaces and reasonable accommodation to express themselves in light of international treaties like the UN Charter and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. My paper focuses on Uganda and indeed focuses on East Africa, really for matters of political, academic convenience. Note that what I'm talking about is uncommon in other spaces. Here, I examine how progressive refugee policies can be enhanced to include meaningful political participation while at the same time addressing legitimate concerns about sovereignty and electoral integrity. The case study of Uganda also reflects the fact that Uganda is probably one of those nations with a significant refugee hosting statistic and its relatively progressive approach to refugee integration, which provides a foundation upon which political participation rights may be constructed. For example, unlike many countries, you can have access to land in Uganda, access to education, among other things. You can get married, you can do so much more apart from participating in political and other civic spaces. This case study, therefore, shows that our nation, Uganda, is probably hosting more than 1.5 million South Sudanese, Democratic Republic of Congo members, Somali refugees, among others. And it makes an ideal laboratory for experimenting the new ways of political inclusion for refugees. Our country's relatively progressive policy, consolidated in the 2006 Refugees Act, permits refugees to work, access services, and move freely within specified areas. There is political participation, which is conspicuously absent from the rights accorded to refugees, reflecting indeed broader global tensions between refugee protection and political sovereignty in that regard. I go through this paper by having an exploration of the international law, looking at the 1951 Refugee Convention and what it provides for in this regard. I look at the ICCPR, which is more limited in terms of political participation by articulating Article 25, the right of all citizens to participate in public life, to vote, etc. But of course, it doesn't include that specific word for refugees, although it's been argued that the word citizen can be interpreted by the United Nations Human Rights Committee being narrowly applying to nations, but we need to have a rethink on whether it shouldn't apply to citizens of the world. Then looking at the African continent, the African Charter of Human and People's Rights entrenches the right of everyone to freely participate in their nation's government without qualification in language that may be interpreted to include long-term residents as well as those who are official citizens. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights has broadly interpreted this provision in marginalized group cases with possible extension to long-term refugee communities. The case law from that commission on indigenous people and pastoralist community rights shows readiness to consider political rights claims on basis of membership in a community and affected interests rather than official citizenship. May I add that in most of our countries, at least within East Africa, where I'm slightly more familiar, we have colonial borders that split up communities. One case in point is, I think, the Madi Kingdom in northwestern Uganda, where the seat of the king is in northern Uganda, but the majority of his subjects are in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so when there is a movement and a meeting, they move from across the borders. Down in the south, you have many, for example, Rwanda-speaking people, Kinyarwanda-speaking people, who are spread out in Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, DRC, and many other spaces. That is the kind of picture that I'd like you to have. A picture of Kenya, where at one point in time, a minister in Uganda was a cousin to a vice president in Kenya. And when I say cousin, I mean biological. Uganda's legal and constitutional framework offers both tremendous opportunities and ongoing limitations for refugee political engagement. Our constitution entitles all citizens with the right to take part in the governance of their country to vote in any election. This sort of provision in the Constitution is a reflection of post-conflict aspirations for democratic governance and political inclusiveness after decades of authoritarianism and civil war. Nonetheless, these rights are unambiguously the preserve of citizens, only clarifying a refugee exclusion regardless of length of residence, extent of integration, or contribution to community life. The citizenship requirement effectively establishes a two-tier system of political membership that undermines wider constitutional assurances of human dignity and equality before the law. I then go into a space of discussing further the different portions of the Refugee Act 2006, looking at what it advances regarding refugees, among other things. But because of time, we'll not be able to get there in 2 minutes. So the research really is exploring those different views. It also goes ahead to have a comparative analysis of what is happening in Sweden, which arguably has good lessons for Uganda, what is happening in Turkey and how you can bangle it up in Turkey, and also looking at what is happening in South Africa. Some of the lessons learned very briefly are questions regarding citizen stripping and statelessness, questions to do with lived experiences of political exclusion, questions to do with mental health and psychological impacts regarding civic exclusion, among other things, as well as ideas for integration. In conclusion, the paper argues that excluding long-term resident refugees from political participation raises questions about human dignity and democratic legitimacy. This exclusion is particularly problematic for refugees who have established deep roots, contributed economically, and raised families in host countries. It also says that while concerns about sovereignty and electoral manipulation do exist, evidence from other countries suggests that carefully designed political inclusion can benefit both refugees and host communities. The global trend towards non-citizen voting rights reflects a growing recognition that political participation should be based on affected interests and long-term residence, not solely on formal citizenship. Lastly, the paper says that for countries like Uganda, which have a progressive approach to refugee protection, the path forward involves gradual approaches to local participation with safeguards framed not as charity, but as recognition of fundamental human dignity. Ultimately, therefore, denying refugees a voice in the political processes that shape their lives undermines their well-being and community integration, making a strong case for institutional changes that provide meaningful opportunities for political participation. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity to share.
Can we have Brian's presentation up there? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Chera, a doctoral candidate at the University of Western Cape. I'm here with my supervisor and colleague, Professor Vesel Leroux. We're going to be presenting a paper titled Expatriate Voting Rights, Two Extreme Views from the Southern African Development Community. So the first slide focuses on the outline of our paper. We have 7 parts that we discuss, and we start by having an introduction, which is followed by the conceptual clarification, and thirdly, where we look at the Zimbabwean view as one extreme view. Then we also look at the African Commission in terms of one of the cases that was before the Commission from some Zimbabweans. In fact, it was actually Gabriel Shumba. And then we also fifthly focus on the South African standpoint view. Then the 6th part gives a third view, a qualified expatriate voting rights. And then ultimately we have the conclusion. So our paper is related to the first theme of the conference, and it deals with the rights of migrants to political participation in general, and with the right of migrants to vote in national elections in particular. And this is more focused in terms of Article 13 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. What we are looking at is mostly the issue of how we need to accommodate Africans who no longer in their countries of birth, right? So you have migrated from country A and now you are residing in country B. And then in our paper, you also realize that that's why we have said that we have 2 extreme views, because one country on the other side has shut that door down completely to say that we are not going to enfranchise any citizen who has left the country, unless if you are out of the country because of you are on a government duty. So you have been deployed, yes, we can then accommodate you to have postal votes. But if you are out of the country because of maybe what have they referred to as luxury visits or for your own accord, then we're not going to accommodate you. So that's one extreme view that we are looking at. So in terms of the conceptual clarification, the paper focuses on the way migration is shaping how we think about political inclusion and exclusion. Who belongs to the people of the demos, and who has the right to vote? So what has just been presented now by the previous presenter in terms of how then do we accommodate refugees? But in our context, we're looking at those citizens who have left their host country, who have left their countries of birth, but now in other host countries, right? And is there anything that is linking them back to their countries of birth, if that is the issue, to say, why do you have to be accommodated? Why do you have to be enfranchised? To what extent can you be allowed to vote? Can you vote is it possible for you to vote in local government elections? Is there anything that attaches you to that particular constituency? Or it makes more sense for you to only participate in national elections where you can only vote for the president, right? So this is the conceptual clarification of part of the paper. And we also look at how does the migration status of a person has an impact on his or her right to vote, followed by the question arises because in terms of Article 13 of the African Charter on Human Rights, Human and People's Rights combines two different legal regimes. So in the first place, we see that it deals with the right to vote, and thus it applies to the electoral laws of member states. And on the other hand, it makes the right to vote conditional on the public law status of the voter, that is citizenship, and thus applies to the nationality and migration laws of the states. So for the purpose of this paper, we also do clarify that we regard a citizen as somebody who is formally recognized as a national by their state. So the first extreme that we focus on in the paper is that of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has been notoriously linked. The government has, in a sense, linked the right to vote to patriotism. So in some of their arguments, they have stated that if you have left the country, then there is no need for you to be enfranchised. You do not have a link to the country. You are not patriotic enough, right? And another argument that they have presented also is that the country does not have enough resources to cater for those who have left willingly, right? Regardless of the fact that you might have left because of the poor healthcare system or the high unemployment rates, they have said that it has nothing to do with them. And most importantly, they have also, the government has also argued that the Constitution precisely does not put a any duty towards the state to make sure or to make sure that those who are outside of the country are afforded this right. So although Zimbabwean expatriates have enjoyed a better life outside of their home country, they have been yearning for the opportunity to take part in the elections through the diaspora vote. So what other countries do, or what in particular restricting the conversation to this paper, what South Africa has done through court cases, beginning from looking from the richer case and then you progress. South Africa then allows their expatriates to vote. And the requirement is that you need to be a citizen. You need to have an ID, right? And then you can vote. You participate, you vote. If you are living outside the country, then you can vote at an embassy, right? And then on the other side, Zimbabwe, as I have mentioned, has said, no, we cannot do that. The Zimbabwean government has been consistent in denying the diaspora vote on the basis that it uses the constituency-based approach, and that the Electoral Act requires one to be physically present in their constituency. And most importantly, the government has argued that those who have left the country are not patriotic enough and should not be afforded the right to vote while it's living abroad. So another argument is the issue of the constituency-based approach, where the government has said that you need to be residing in a particular constituency so that you can vote. However, the debate, I think, has moved on from that in terms of maybe the national voting. Of course, the constituency-based approach argument can hold some water, but when it comes to national elections, I don't think it stands a chance. And also, as we will see in the case of Tavengwa and the chairman of ZEC, which is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, just after that case, the requirement for one to be in a constituency was 12 months. So you had to reside in a constituency, and you had to you could not leave for at least 12 months, right? So once you have left for 12 months, your name is then removed from the voters' roll. And after a case that was before the court, then the government went on to then amend that particular section, so that the requirement currently now is 18 months, right? So in Tavengwa Bukaibenyu versus the chairman of Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, the case was before the courts, and Tavengwa was a Zimbabwean truck driver who was based in South Africa, and he made an application to the Constitutional Court to allow Zimbabweans who were living abroad to be part of the referendum and voting in the oncoming elections. The applicant had argued that the requirement for one to be a resident in a constituency in terms of Section 23 of the Electoral Act was unconstitutional because it allowed for one to be removed from the voters if they were absent from the constituency for a period of 12 months. So as I said, that when the case was being heard, it was still 12 months, but they have now amended that to 18 months. So the applicant contested the limitation of Section 71 of the Electoral Act because it only allowed those outside the country on government duty to vote via post, as I previously mentioned that. So there's no, we are not saying that external voting is not allowed. There is external voting, but it's only reserved for mostly government employees who are deployed, who are working on a government duty outside. So that case was, the applicant lost. There wasn't much out of it. And also the first time that it was heard, there was no constitutional court yet, and then it was dismissed without reasons. And reasons were only given later, I think around 2017. So reasons for the judgment were also given after like 4 years. And then we also have a case of Gabriel Shumba versus the Minister of Justice, which was also around 2012, which was before the African Commission. And then the case dealt with an application by Zimbabwean citizens who were not resident in Zimbabwe due to different reasons, but they wanted to take part in the harmonized elections of 2018. Most importantly, it was the issue of the applicants challenging Section 23 of the Electoral Act, which did not allow citizens who resided outside the country to register as voters. So as I said, that there's that requirement of residence and order. One of the main arguments brought forward by the applicants was that the Constitution allowed for every citizen over the age of 18 to vote, and there was no direct requirement condition of residence that stemmed from the Constitution. So the issue is that on one hand, you have the Constitution, which specifically states that the requirement is one is to be over the age of 18 and to be a citizen. The residence issue and the period of residence comes from the Electoral Act. So there's also that discrepancy where do we then say the Constitution is the supreme law? Do we then rely on the Electoral Act? And when do we rely on the Electoral Act? So in dealing with some of the issues, the arguments that were presented by the government, as I have previously mentioned, it was also the issue of that they did not have enough resources, and also that they were not in a position to cater for those who were living outside, and most importantly, that they had left willingly, and also the country was in a poor state because of sanctions. So those are some of the reasons that were given by the government of Zimbabwe in saying that they can't afford at the moment to enfranchise those who are living outside. So the Commission did not accept the argument that non-resident citizens were not afforded the right to vote from abroad because, as presented by the Zimbabwean government, they were less informed and would thus not be able to cast a meaningful vote. So that argument by the Zimbabwean government was, why then do you need to participate while you are living abroad? But it also then brings up different issues or different concerns where the diasporans have consistently raised the issue of we send money, there's that issue of remittances. And how can it be linked also to the issue of if we are sending money and you are getting a lot of remittances, aren't you then supposed to also cater for us in allowing us or in enfranchising us? But the paper is still a draft and there's still a lot to write. And I'd like to leave the podium for my colleague to discuss the South African view.
I've been given 5 minutes, so I'll try and wrap up my part in the 5 minutes. So the position in South Africa as far as non-resident citizens reflects a policy reversal. We started off with much the position as in Zimbabwe, where people who immigrated from South Africa were regarded widely as unpatriotic, racists who did not want to live under the new majoritarian black government. And in line with that policy decision or that perception of the diasporic community, during our 1999 elections, no provision was made for external voting for normal citizens, nor were non-resident citizens allowed to participate in elections. One had to be resident in the country and vote where you were resident. That position held until 2009, when the Constitutional Court in a case called Richter versus the Minister of Home Affairs made two important findings. The first one, that external voting must be allowed for all citizens who are registered as voters. The logic, the state has a duty to facilitate or create the opportunity for citizens who want to vote to exercise the right to vote, and to expect people overseas to travel back to the country during elections is an unreasonable measure, firstly. Secondly, the court said that it might be rational, this view of immigrants as unpatriotic deserters of the country, and that such a policy would not withstand constitutional scrutiny. Next slide, please. So the ANC government then introduced external voting and expatriate voting for non-resident citizens in 2014, but it did so in a way that went directly opposite to the position that Brian explained in Zimbabwe. So currently under South African law, a citizen can register either as a resident of the country or as a resident abroad. And regardless of how you are registered, during elections, you have a right to cast an external ballot in person at an embassy, a high consul, a consulate, or a high commission. We've therefore seen a complete reversal from the position that pertains in Zimbabwe to the position currently in South Africa. Why do we explain this as also an extreme position? Well, firstly, it allows all non-resident citizens to vote without any restrictions. That means that there's no obligation on any citizen to show that there's a link or connection between his life and the government in South Africa, that that person is affected by decisions taken by the government in South Africa, or that there's any other connection. Therefore, expatriate voting rights also apply to second and third generation citizens who was not born or were not born in South Africa and might not have ever visited South Africa, with only literally a paper thin, meaning the document proving your nationality, connection with South Africa. Next slide, thank you. We explored a third alternative between the two extremes presented by Zimbabwe and South Africa. There's a trend globally amongst a number of democracies to extend voting rights to non-resident citizens. And we look at Canada, the UK, and Germany as an example. To summarize briefly, these countries all require certain additional conditions applicable to expatriate citizens. They do not treat expatriate citizens as similar to normal citizens. So they do allow non-resident citizens to vote, unlike Zimbabwe, but they do not allow every non-resident citizen to vote, as in South Africa. What conditions do they impose? Typically, a prior registration or residence requirement. So you need to prove that you lived in the country at one stage, or even that you were already registered as a voter. That means you retain your right to vote when you leave the country. Secondly, These countries all experiment with a time limit within which you retain your right to vote, and that ranges from 5 years to 25 years. So it's a combination of those two things that are imposed by the majority of democracies, we argue. That represents a third alternative, is our case. Thank you. You can skip then to the conclusion. So to get back to Article 13 of the African Charter speaks of citizenship only, Article 13, but in the case of migration, residence is a crucial concept here. How much resident matters and for how long it matters and why it matters is a crucial question. We argue that it matters too much in the Zimbabwean context because no non-residents can vote. It matters too little in the South African context because all non-resident citizens can vote. And so we argue that this third position adopted by the democracies I just referred to is the one that should be followed and adopted. Next slide, please. So our proposal is that citizens should retain the right to vote in the country of nationality for as long as that citizen has not yet assumed permanent resident status elsewhere. In other words, you retain your right to vote as long as you haven't assumed permanent residence elsewhere. And added to that, a prior residence or registration requirement makes complete sense. Next slide, please. Some of the implications of our proposal. The first thing is that, as I said, a non-resident citizen should retain the right to vote until permanent resident status is assumed elsewhere. But the inverse of that, and this relates to our previous speaker, at that point, the non-citizen resident in the other country should acquire the right to vote. And therefore, you retain the right to vote until you become a permanent resident, but you should gain the right to vote in the other country at the point you become a permanent resident. That means that this relationship between losing and gaining voting rights is really a bilateral thing. It's something that needs to be regulated between two different countries, either bilaterally or through a treaty in the SADC region or perhaps a union treaty. And lastly, it means that if this matter ever reaches the African court, the court should not follow the judgment or the decision by the Commission in the Shumba case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Arnaud with us online?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. If Arnaud is ready, you can proceed. Please, Arnaud, you'll be presenting in French.
Yes,
so
in French.
Those of you who do not understand French properly, this is your chance to learn as you listen. You have the floor, Arnaud. 15 minutes, please. Thank you.
Je vous remercie, donc, chère Madame la modératrice, de me donner la parole. Je remercie également le Centre for Human Rights de l'Université de Pretoria et l'Université de Cape Town pour cette très belle opportunité qu'elle nous offre à nous tous de discuter de certaines problématiques relatives aux droits de l'homme en Afrique notamment. Je tiens également à saluer l'ensemble des étudiants et leurs instructeurs respectifs venus participer au concours et à qui je souhaite une excellente semaine de compétition. Je m'excuse d'ores et déjà auprès des anglophones pour le fait que je n'ai utilisé que des expressions en français, que la langue française pour ma présentation. Et à ce titre, justement, j'ai réduit les éléments de ma présentation de sorte à permettre une égalité entre le public anglophone et le public francophone. Et parlons donc d'égalité, j'ai le plaisir de vous présenter mon sujet de réflexion sur les discours de haine à l'encontre d'un groupe national dans les États post-coloniaux, une lecture conséquentialiste de la liberté d'expression sélective. Vous remarquerez donc une légère modification du sujet par rapport à ce qui vous a été présenté d'office. La modification est relative au fait de l'intérêt de mettre en lien véritablement, de refléter concrètement le contenu de mon travail avec le sujet de la présentation. Et donc, je vais vous présenter la présentation en commençant par un constat. C'est un constat que j'ai fait relativement, premièrement, à un handicap majeur et puis, deuxièmement, à une complexité d'ordre sociologique. Sur le handicap majeur, il s'agit, comme vous le voyez à l'écran, de l'article 9, paragraphe 2 de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, notamment sur la longueur de l'article. L'article est intitulé « Toute personne a le droit d'exprimer et de diffuser ses opinions dans le cadre des lois et règlements ». Donc, on remarque ici que l'article ne comporte qu'une seule phrase. Ensuite, ce qu'on peut en déduire, c'est qu'il a une portée trop générale. Et à ce titre, l'article 9, paragraphe 2 de la Charte africaine est sous l'empire des lois et règlements. Donc, le fait qu'il soit sous l'empire des lois et règlements des États leur laisse la latitude pour en déterminer la portée selon leurs différentes conceptions. Donc, il peut avoir, en fonction de chaque État, des conceptions qui changent d'un État à un autre, puisque l'article 9, paragraphe 2 de la Charte leur laisse cette possibilité. Donc, en conséquence, on a une impossibilité au niveau régional africain d'avoir une conception commune de la liberté d'expression. Le deuxième constat, il concerne la complexité d'ordre sociologique. Et cette complexité d'ordre sociologique est liée à la formation des groupes nationaux, notamment en Afrique. Je vais commencer par vous donner la définition du groupe national. Et je retiens donc une définition qui a été donnée par le tribunal pénal international pour le Rwanda dans l'affaire Jean-Paul Akayesu, dans son arrêt particulièrement rendu en 1998 au paragraphe 512. Le tribunal pénal international pour le Rwanda affirme qu'un groupe national qualifie un ensemble de personnes considérées comme partageant un lien juridique basé sur une citoyenneté commune, jointe à une réciprocité de droits et de devoirs. Le constat qu'on peut en faire, c'est que si le critère de nationalité est celui qui intervient de manière flagrante pour distinguer un groupe d'un autre, il peut aussi exister un critère ethnique ou un critère racial, de sorte que ce qui intéresse ici l'observateur, c'est soit l'existence d'une minorité ethnique ou une minorité raciale par rapport à une majorité ethnique ou une majorité raciale. Donc, au sein des États, il peut exister le fait qu'il y ait un groupe ethnique qui constitue un groupe national. Un groupe racial également peut constituer un groupe national. Et puis, on a la notion de groupe national qui s'étend à l'ensemble de la communauté nationale, c'est-à-dire les individus à l'échelle nationale disposant de la nationalité. Et donc, c'est un constat qui est complexe. Et quand on joint cette complexité d'ordre sociologique à la réalité sociologique africaine, la question se complexifie davantage. En Afrique, par exemple, la formation des groupes nationaux est particulière. On avait au départ des individus qui faisaient partie, ou plutôt qui avaient la nationalité des États qui avaient amené la colonisation en Afrique et qui, par le fait de l'indépendance, ont pu acquérir la nationalité de l'État africain nouvellement constitué. On a également des individus d'origine africaine qui, au départ, avaient la citoyenneté d'un État européen et qui, finalement, par le fait des indépendances, ont pu acquérir la nationalité de l'État africain nouvellement constitué. On a aussi des individus d'origine africaine qui avaient le statut d'indigène européen, qui finalement ont pu avoir la nationalité de l'État nouvellement constitué africain. Et puis, on a enfin le fait que sur plusieurs territoires distincts africains, il existe la même ethnie qui est représentée. Donc, ce qui fait que finalement, une ethnie peut être minoritaire au sein d'un État, et majoritaire au sein de l'État voisin. Donc cette formation particulière et très complexe des groupes nationaux en Afrique du fait de la colonisation et des indépendances est de nature à créer des environnements de méfiance dus au sentiment chez certains membres des groupes nationaux de se sentir supérieurs aux membres d'un autre groupe national, peu importe la représentation de ce groupe. Donc cela crée une influence sur le concept de la nationalité. Le concept de la nationalité est certes précis en droit, donc il s'analyse au regard du lien de la nationalité, mais dans la sociologie des groupes nationaux en Afrique, ce n'est pas toujours précis. Donc tout se trouve dans la perception collective des différents individus. Un individu est perçu comme étranger parce qu'il est véritablement étranger, mais un autre individu peut être perçu comme étranger alors qu'il ne l'est pas véritablement. Donc il est perçu comme étranger parce qu'il appartient à un groupe national, soit ethnique minoritaire, soit racial minoritaire. Et donc, dans ce climat de perception collective parfois erronée de la nationalité d'autrui, il y a lieu de se poser la question suivante. La limitation à la liberté d'expression peut-elle être fondée sur la nationalité? Autrement dit, est-ce que on peut inclure la liberté d'expression dans le domaine exclusif des nationaux? On sait ce que c'est que le domaine exclusif des nationaux. Il y a, par exemple, le droit de vote qui a été énuméré par mon prédécesseur. Il y a également la question d'intégrer des postes stratégiques au sein de la fonction publique, etc. Donc la question, c'est est-ce qu'on peut inclure la liberté d'expression dans ce qui constitue le domaine exclusif des nationaux? Ma réponse, c'est non. Donc, je réponds par la négative. Et je pense qu'à ce titre, nous devons être guidés par les principes qui consacrent une société démocratique. La Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples avait affirmé dans l'arrêt TSL et autres contre Tanzanie que toute formalité, toute condition, restriction ou sanction imposée doit être proportionnelle au but légitime poursuivi. La Cour rappelait à ce titre le propos de l'arrêt Handicide contre Royaume-Uni rendu par la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme. Donc, l'expression but légitime poursuivi est, à mon sens, très importante en ce que, effectivement, la liberté d'expression peut trouver ses limites dans certaines catégories, par exemple la liberté d'expression, par exemple la liberté de conscience, la liberté de religion, etc., dans une société démocratique. Mais à mon sens, les étrangers, quelle que soit la perception collective de cette qualité, ne peuvent se voir leur liberté d'expression restreinte du seul fait qu'ils ont la qualité d'étrangers. Et on a également des dispositions dans la Charte africaine de la démocratie qui peuvent nous guider dans cette affirmation. Donc, lorsque cette affirmation, qui peut être réfutée par certains d'entre vous, et nous aurons sûrement l'occasion d'en discuter tout à l'heure, lorsque cette affirmation est retenue et s'impose au sein de la communauté nationale étatique, il y a évidemment un risque qu'il advienne des discours de haine. Alors, qu'est-ce que c'est que les discours de haine? Je reconnais les difficultés de définition générale de la notion. D'ailleurs, au niveau international, il n'y a pas de définition universelle du concept de discours de haine. Mais je pense que lorsque le sujet concerne les groupes nationaux, il est beaucoup plus facile de définir la notion. Et sur ce point, je me réfère au plan d'action de Rabat sur l'interdiction de l'appel à la haine nationale, raciale et religieuse, qui certes n'a pas de force juridique contraignante, mais qui énumère des éléments qui permettent de définir le concept de discours de haine à l'aune du sujet que je suis en train de vous présenter. Alors, ce plan concerne une grille d'évaluation qui, elle également, comporte 6 points qui peuvent nous aider à définir la notion ou le concept de discours de haine. Donc, ces points sont le contexte social et politique. Deuxième point, le statut de l'orateur. Le troisième point, c'est l'incitation c'est le fait d'inciter le public à prendre pour cible un groupe. Le 4e point, c'est le contenu ou la forme du discours. Le 5e point, c'est l'ampleur de la diffusion du discours. Et puis le dernier point, c'est la probabilité du préjudice. Donc, on retient ici que le discours de haine à l'encontre d'un groupe, les discours de haine, pardon, à l'encontre d'un groupe peuvent avoir des conséquences graves sur les membres d'un groupe. Et il n'est absolument pas nécessaire que les propos aient causé des violences physiques à l'encontre d'un membre du groupe. Donc, la simple probabilité des conséquences ou la simple probabilité que ces conséquences adviennent dans le cours normal des choses suffit pour qu'on puisse retenir l'existence de discours de haine. C'est d'ailleurs en quelque sorte ce qu'a retenu la Haute Cour d'Afrique du Sud dans l'affaire qui opposait la Commission sud-africaine des droits de l'homme à M. Velapi Kumalo. Donc, voilà l'idée, en fait, que les discours de haine puissent avoir pour conséquence prévisible l'escalade de violence. Et donc, il est possible et il est fort probable que les discours de haine causent une escalade de violence physique. Et les exemples les plus courants d'escalade de violence physique du fait des discours de haine peuvent être des crimes internationaux, par exemple. Quand on regarde l'article 5 du statut de Rome qui crée la Cour pénale internationale, on peut y observer que les différents crimes internationaux qui sont identifiés par le statut de Rome constituent des violations massives de droits fondamentaux puisqu'ils touchent à l'ensemble de la communauté internationale. Je vais donc identifier parmi ces différents crimes internationaux 2 parmi eux qui sont intimement ou qui peuvent être intimement liés au concept des discours de haine. On a d'abord le crime de génocide et ensuite le crime contre l'humanité. Le crime de génocide est défini comme un crime qui est commis à l'encontre d'un groupe national, religieux, ethnique ou racial, et il faut qu'il soit prouvé que l'individu qui est responsable ou dont on accuse d'être responsable, d'être responsable des crimes de génocide, ait eu l'intention de s'attaquer de manière spécifique au groupe. Et dans le cadre de cette intention, on peut y inclure le discours de haine. Et c'est d'ailleurs ce que le tribunal pénal international pour le Rwanda, qui avait une compétence spécifique à l'égard du Rwanda, avait affirmé dans l'affaire Naïmana et autres, dans l'affaire le bureau de procureur du tribunal contre Naïmana et autres. Il y a également les crimes contre l'humanité, parmi lesquels on peut retrouver les actes de persécution à l'encontre d'un groupe et les autres actes inhumains qui peuvent être entendus comme des crimes contre l'humanité commis du fait des discours de haine, dans la mesure où ces discours de haine s'inscrivent dans le cadre ou dans la poursuite d'une attaque généralisée ou systématique à l'encontre d'une population civile ciblée. Et donc, voici les conséquences que je voudrais et que je souhaitais énumérer en ce qui concerne les discours de haine à l'encontre d'un groupe national et particulièrement à l'encontre d'un groupe national en Afrique. Et il est important que les États puissent avoir une certaine réaction vis-à-vis de ce problème. La première réaction des États, à mon sens, serait de renforcer l'article 9, paragraphe 2, peut-être par une modification de cette disposition. Donc, en cela, j'estime qu'il existe un problème au niveau conventionnel qui fait que, puisque la définition ou la portée de la liberté d'expression est trop générale, eh bien, il est difficile de lutter contre les discours de haine qui pourraient advenir contre les groupes nationaux en Afrique, vu la complexité de leur constitution dans ce continent. La Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples pourrait s'appuyer, par exemple, sur les termes de l'article 10 de la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme ou ceux de l'article 13 de la Convention interaméricaine des droits de l'homme qui sont beaucoup plus étendus et qui permettent aux États d'avoir une certaine vision commune de la notion de liberté d'expression et qui pourraient éviter justement, ou plutôt qui pourrait permettre aux États de lutter de manière efficace contre les discours de haine qui adviendraient à l'encontre des groupes nationaux en Afrique. Et puis, il peut également avoir une autre... 2 minutes. Yes.
Oui. Concluez, s'il vous plaît, maintenant.
Exactement. Je vous remercie, chère Madame la modératrice. Donc, je terminerai pour dire qu'on peut également penser à l'éventuelle adoption d'une convention ou d'une charte africaine sur la liberté d'expression, mais c'est une idée je ne pense pas que cette idée soit absolument entendue, mais ça peut être quelque chose sur laquelle on peut s'appuyer dans la réflexion. Et puis, naturellement, il faut, je pense, éduquer et sensibiliser à la notion de nationalité, mais également à l'histoire de l'Afrique du fait de la colonisation, qui fait que l'existence des groupes nationaux est particulière et propre à l'Afrique. Et à ce titre, il faudrait que les populations puissent comprendre que la notion de nationalité doit être entendue à l'aune du droit et non à l'aune de la conception collective qu'elles ont depuis lors. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, everyone. A round of applause, yes, thank you. Merci pour la présentation, Arnaud. I will go straight away to the Q&A session. And please be reminded of our simple rule. Just keep your questions, comments very concise and clear. Once you introduce yourself, please let us know exactly who you're directing your question to so that they start to prepare as you put your questions forward, and we'll keep it as brief as possible. But before we do that, I think we must commend the diversity in the focus areas within the theme that was the focus of this round. So let's put our hands together once again for the presenters. So an excellent job. Okay, we'll take a couple of rounds of questions. I know there are roving mics around. Yes, 1, 2, and then 3. Let's start with that. Then we'll come to this side next.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Gabriella Lafoy from the IIE. My question is for, I think it was the third presentation, which contrasts voting rights in South Africa and Zimbabwe, which were presented as two extremes. My question relates to the presentation said that South African expatriates can vote for the 200 PR seats. And we know that there are 400 seats in the National Assembly, 200 list and 200 PR. So my question is, are expatriates in terms of the current policy precluded from voting for the list seats? And what is the reason for that? Is it a policy rationale, or can we trace the rationale for it back to the Constitutional Court case of Richter or some other jurisprudence? What is the reason for the distinction? Because it does operate as a qualification. Thank you.
Thank you. First, my question and a clarification as well goes to Dr. Itunu and Gloria, where you argue that is a challenge that these migrants face, especially with the prevalence of focusing on online activism. So my question is it that they're scared of being arrested when they go to the streets, so that they're resorting to online? But then secondly, you argue that the other challenge is that there's a challenge on freedom of expression. So my question is, what is the nature? Is there blockages that they cannot express themselves easily? But what could be that challenge? I didn't get that very clearly.
I'll take the third one before we go to the speakers.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Bewell, Kwame University of Science and Technology, Ghana. I have a question for all the presenters. From the bottom, Kofi I would want to know, he suggested that there should be a definition or a scope given to freedom of expression. And my question is, don't you think that will be limiting, considering the fact that new ways of expressing ourselves may emerge in the future? How do you address that? Then my question to the third presentation in relation to expatriate voting. Is your proposal limited to legal expatriate or it includes illegal expatriate? So if a person is found in the host state illegally, can the person also demand that the home state should make provision for such a person to vote, considering the fact that the home states also have the obligation in international law to ensure that its citizens comply with laws of the host states? Then the second question goes to my friend from Uganda. Your proposal, are you suggesting that non-citizens or persons who are found in host states without acquiring citizenship should determine who lead, who are elected as leaders in that country? Because the examples you give seems to suggest that all the persons you mentioned acquired some form of legal recognition, i.e. acquired citizenship before they are allowed to represent or to even participate in that. But I don't know, I didn't get that quite clearly. Are you suggesting that without they going through that process, they should be allowed to participate? And the first presentation in relation to protests, those protesters, are you suggesting that without going through the procedural requirement in undertaking a protest? Of course, every country has a process you must go through to be able to protest legally. Are you saying that without going through that, they should have a free range of protests because it is their right? Is that your suggestion? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll proceed in this order. We'll start with Daniel for this round, and then we'll go this way, and then end with Anod. Then when we take a second round, we'll start with Anod and then go in that order. Thank you. So Daniel, you can start.
Thank you very much, Prof, and for the questions that have been asked. Very briefly, the suggestion in my paper is that if you are staying in a place for a prolonged period of time, you are contributing economically in that space. You're working, but you do not have the status of being called a citizen. You should be allowed to vote in that area. That does not mean that you are the only one determining, but that you're participating in the affairs affecting your country or the place where you are. I'll give you a simple example. When I was pursuing my doctoral studies, I was allowed to vote for the local leadership, to participate in that election for the local leadership in that area. Why? Because I was there for a prolonged period of time as a student and so on and so forth. That is the proposal. Yes.
In answering the question about whether they have to be legal or illegal, I think the short and straightforward answer is that they have to be legal, because there's also that issue that you, even if you have electoral laws and you are an independent country, you still have to abide by international migration laws. So I don't think that you can be illegal and then still want to participate, because it also may lead to creating friction between the host country and then the country where, if you are voting at an embassy or consulate, either way. But being legal, I think it also solves and reduces a lot of issues.
Thank you for the question. My question was about expatriate voting rights in South Africa and whom exactly they can vote for. So I said expatriate voting rights were introduced in 2014, but the situation changed just before the 2024 election because the law was amended as a result not of the Richter judgment, but the New Nation Movement judgment. In that judgment, the Constitutional Court said that the inability of independent candidates to stand in the South African election was unconstitutional and therefore set aside our electoral system. As a result of that, the electoral system was amended to also allow for independent candidates to stand, and that was done by splitting the seats in the National Assembly, our parliament, the lower house, into two, and to create what is called regions in which independent candidates can stand. So 9 regions were created and 200 seats in parliament assigned to those regions, and then the remaining 200 remained national seats where independent candidates couldn't stand, but people voted for political parties. And those are called compensatory seats. Now, this had a decisive impact on the voting rights of the expatriates because they not resident in any of the regions. They couldn't register and vote in the regions. They retained the right to vote as expatriates, but only for those national seats that's now called the compensatory seats in Parliament. So that's why I said 200 seats in Parliament. It's got nothing to do with the Richter case. It's the effect of the New Nation Movement judgment and the subsequent electoral reforms. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'll try to answer the question on online activism. From my research, online activism for migrants process, from my research, our research reveals that about 15.6% of our respondents prefer online activism rather than physical protest. To them, they feel safer engaging in all that than physical protest. And then there's this case in UK, it's a 2025 case, the case of National Council for Civil Liberties versus the Secretary of State for Home Department, 2025 ECWA 571. In that case, the UK courts found out that giving police unrestricted powers to engage protesters was not in line with their constitutional rights. And the court held that that regulation should be quashed because it tends to limit their rights to protest. According to the court, in as much as their protest is peaceful, then they should be allowed to engage in such protests within their rights. So we believe that our respondents engaging in online activities, they feel safe engaging in that other than physical protests. Thank you.
Okay. So the second question, I believe, is on the challenge of freedom of expression. You know, in our research, we did a case study of the United Kingdom, Canada, and the USA. When we did that case study, we did like a comparative, analysis of these 3 countries. And it was, our findings reveal that most people who engage in migrant protests will always, the repercussion or the consequences of such protests would always be either they face deportation or they are put in this surveillance where the government monitors their movements, monitors everything about them. There's a case that we also refer to in our work. I won't be able to get it right now, but where someone who engaged in such a protest was later faced that repercussion of a deportation back to his home country. I don't know if I answered that question. Thank you.
Arnaud, Votre réponse? Anod, are you still with us? Rather than spend time on that, can I have the second round of questions for now from this side? Yes. I see hand number 1, number 2 there behind, the gentleman there. Yes. And I need one lady. Balance it out. If I don't find one, then I take the last one. No. Yes. Start from that end. I want the questions on this side first, the first 3. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Soleh Wengo, and I'm a PhD candidate at UCT. I have 2 questions, one from Dr. Ruhweza, and another one is more of a combination question for Professor Wiesel, Brian, and Kofi. So my first question is to Dr. Ruhweza. In countries like Uganda and more recently in Kenya, we have the issue of the government issuing national identity cards that have an expiry date. And when these IDs expire, it becomes more of a bureaucratic and a very tedious process to renew them. And it is more precarious actually to refugees and migrants. So I wanted to pick your brain on this as to whether or not you considered the question of expiry of identity card, because it becomes a challenge then for these individuals to participate in civic process and public participation, and therefore whether you considered this. And then the question to Brian and Professor Wiesel is, which goes also to Kofi, what's the distinction between nationality and citizenship, and whether that distinction will have an effect on the applicability of Article 13 of the African Charter. And the reason why I'm asking is because Kofi talked about the question of nationality and the issue of the genuine link, which Professor Wiesel, you talked it as the third view in terms of the connection that must be there, as prior residence might also be vital. So that creates the question as to nationality and citizenship, and whether the applicability of Article 13 will be affected by the distinction between the two. Thank you.
That's right. That gentleman with the earphones. Yes.
Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Je suis Olivier Kimpiatou, Université Congo, République démocratique du Congo. Ma question s'adresse au dernier intervenant, je pense que c'est Arnaud, qui a chuté par une conclusion qui est vraiment aussi brève en disant qu'il faut renforcer l'article 9.2 de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme. Alors, j'aimerais savoir en quoi doit porter ces renforcements de cette disposition précitée, ou quels sont les mécanismes de renforcement de cette disposition. Merci.
Thank you. My question goes to Daniel. Given the time frame for which Uganda has hosted refugees, what would be your proposed modes in which the refugees should then be incorporated into the political participation within Uganda as a state?
Thank you very much. We'll wrap up with those.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Repeat the question, please, quickly.
I'd like to pick your brain on how you intend to put about proposals on how the refugee community should be incorporated in political participation within Uganda, given the timelines of how long some of the refugees have stayed around. Thank you.
Arnaud, are you there? Your mic is muted if you can hear me. Arnaud, Kofi? Okay. We go back to those in the room.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, please, very briefly, please.
Oui, alors il y avait j'ai complètement raté la les questions sur la première vague. Je vous prie de m'en excuser. Sur cette seconde vague, il me semble, je vous ai perdu un tout petit peu. Si j'ai bien entendu les questions qui ont été posées, on m'a posé une première question sur la distinction entre la nationalité et la citoyenneté. Et il me semble qu'il y avait une autre question sur mes conséquences quant à l'article 9.2 de la charte. Donc, assez brièvement, la distinction concrète qu'on peut faire entre la nationalité et la citoyenneté, à mon sens, c'est que la première expression, la nationalité, c'est une situation juridique. C'est l'existence du lien juridique entre deux ou plusieurs individus par rapport à un État, alors que le plus souvent, la citoyenneté, c'est un concept politique. La citoyenneté, pardon, c'est un concept politique. Donc, c'est la distinction globale que je peux faire. Peut-être que mes confrères auront l'opportunité de compléter cette distinction. Et puis, sur ma conclusion quant à l'article 9, paragraphe 2 de la charte, comme je l'ai dit, c'est une disposition qui est trop courte, qui ne comporte qu'une seule phrase. Donc, l'idée, ce serait de la rendre plus vaste, plus longue. Et à ce titre, on pourrait se référer à des dispositions qui sont contenues dans des instruments de systèmes frères, comme le système européen ou le système interaméricain, qui, eux, ont pris la peine, je pense, ont pris la peine de développer et d'indiquer aux États de manière plus stricte et plus précise comment est-ce que leur conception globale de la liberté d'expression pourrait se faire. Quand on demande aux États selon leurs lois et règlements, et quand on se limite uniquement à ça, de définir ce que c'est que la liberté d'expression, ce n'est pas de nature à permettre une conception commune de la notion. Merci.
Merci.
Je voulais également intervenir sur le droit de vote, mais si on a le temps après, parce que je pense qu'il y avait une question sur le droit de vote. Merci.
No, for now, please hold on. Let's hear from the rest of the room. We're really out of time. Thank you.
Should I go first? Oh, they go first. Okay.
Yes, if I can speak quickly to the distinction between nationality and citizenship, I agree with what was just said. Nationality, one could think, is the link between a state and individual. It's very relevant in international law and the obligations of a state to nationals outside the country, especially. Citizenship can be a sociological, political concept that speaks to active participation within polity and specifically political participation. But of course, the two terms are often used interchangeably and as synonyms. And in what sense it's used in Article 13 of the Charter, I think is something that we will learn later during this week. Thank you.
Take the heat of the thought.
All right. The wording of for example, of some constitutions in Uganda, I mean in Africa, are very clear on who is and who is not a citizen. So sometimes you could pick a cue from that. If I can add my unsolicited view. There was a question asked regarding what happens when we have expired identification cards. It is true that some of our countries now have developed the idea of using identification cards to do everything. You want to get a place in a school, you want to be admitted at the university, you want to open a bank account. If you want to do anything like starting a business, registering one, everything requires this identity card. And the process is an expensive one. Most of the identification cards in Uganda, as an example, are now expired. And an instrument was signed by the minister concerned, extending these identification cards for another 2 or 3 months, if I recall correctly. As to how legal that process is, we don't know, but it seems whoever needs the identification card is using them. So that's an area that we need to explore in light of the question you've asked. But for identification cards are normally issued to citizens. The refugees or asylum seekers and other migrants are not being given these identification cards unless they can prove that they are citizens or that they have acquired the different forms of citizenship that are required in the different countries that we are talking about. So it's a big disturbing issue. I totally agree. But since I was concentrating on migrants and refugees and that classification of people, I did not tackle this for that particular reason.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, regarding very quickly proposals on how the proposals I am suggesting may or can be incorporated within the legislative framework. We have lobbying that takes place. For example, the Ugandan Banyarwanda, who are a recognized ethnic group within Uganda, are lobbying for a certain form of recognition over and above being in the constitution, because it seems in practice, when they are trying to acquire documentation, they are being asked an extra test to prove that they are Rwandan of Ugandan origin and not Rwandan of Rwandan origin. So there's a problem there. And so I have seen them lobbying before the president. Some have gone to court. I think there were Somalis who were born, Ugandan Somalis who enjoyed one parent being an indigenous Ugandan.
Thank you, Daniel.
And those have also gone to court for that.
Thank you, Daniel.
Of reason. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
In relation to imbibing the spirit of the Moot,
oh, okay.
The idea of these conferences is not to answer all the questions here. Continue with Daniel during the tea break, during lunch, with the other speakers. We have their email addresses for those of you who are thinking about research beyond now. We can share them with you. So do not let the conversations die. Think of these discussions, but also think about the counter arguments from the other side and start thinking, how do you respond to those issues and the concerns, the legitimate concerns that are raised by those issues, for example, in the host countries and states. Those are the realities of our times, especially now where the idea is for everybody to make everywhere great again. So you need to think about those things as you proceed on this journey. I want to thank you very much for your patience and time. Let's give another round of applause to all our speakers. See you soon. How many minutes? Please come tell them so they know that this time, when you are asked to be back at a certain time, please comply. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you so much to our presenters in person as well as our presenter online. And thank you very much to the audience for being so engaging during our first moderated session. It's now, I think, 11:55, so we have a 20-minute tea break. We expect to see you back in the lecture theatre at 12:15. So please feel free to stretch your legs and have something to eat and drink outside. Thank you.
Yes. The process is so unfortunately, the kids will not go much further than one. But it's the real thing. And unfortunately, we're not as unfortunate, but we are the consequence of this asylum seekers. One of them is poor. Others, human people that have cities. For it, go away and that's it.
Should I take up the third one? Okay, the third one, should I be myself or should I sort it out? It just takes.
So welcome back to those who are back. We are just making noise so that those who are outside can hear us being busy, but we promise to start in about 2-3 minutes. So your time should not be wasted, and thank you for returning. We will try to get the other participants in from outside, so at least we'll start in a minute or two. But thank you for being here, and I hope the interpreters are also back, and that we will be able to do the online. There will only be one online presenter, but there will be only online presenters, all three of them. So we hope that that works out fine. One in French and two in English. It was just only online, was not initially.
All right, everyone, we're about to start back up again. If you're walking in, please take a seat. If there's anyone still outside, if we can let them know to return to the lecture theatre. We're now going into our second and final moderated session of the morning, or the afternoon rather. Our presenters during this session have written or have prepared presentations under the theme Teaching of and on the African Human Rights System. Our moderator for the session is Professor Frans Viljoen, who is a professor in international human rights law at the University of Pretoria. So I shall allow Professor Viljoen to introduce the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cheryl. And good afternoon and welcome again. So this session really looks at not one of the themes that are linked to the hypothetical case. That's what we did, obviously, in the first session. We hope that was useful to you. Have you taken some notes and complementary jurisprudence maybe that you'll refer to? Now, this session, we do something different. We look at the competition maybe in a more holistic way, because you may realize that the idea of the African Moot was born and it started already in 1992. So one of the ambitions was to, in a sense, will into being the existence of the African court, because the Moot court started when there was no African court, right? When, by the way, did the African court start? When did it open its doors? Anyone? What year did the African court really start operating? Yes? In 2004, the protocol entered into force, that's right, but it was only in 2006. I'm saying that because next year you'll hear we celebrate 20 years of the African court. And that means 20 years since the court has started to function and operate. So that was one of the ambitions of the African Moot Court competition when it started, to make the idea of an African court a semi-reality by this participation of students. But the other ideals had been to create awareness around the African human rights system, the existence of the Commission as well, and also to, if you like, stimulate the teaching within law faculties on the African human rights system. So today we are, in a sense, taking stock of to what extent had this been realized, to what extent do we actually find that in our various faculties the African human rights system is being taught, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities to the teaching of the African human rights system, the focus on the court. And we would very much like to have your contributions and your inputs into this discussion as well. But we will start off with someone who is based at the African court. So we'll be online joined by Professor Misha Vibush. He is a senior legal officer at the African Court on Human and People's Rights, but he is remarkably also an associate professor here at the University of Cape Town. So he's not here permanently, but he does venture here from time to time. And he will look into a topic that he has researched, and that is to give us some sense of also what, is out there. His title, as you'll see from the program, is entitled, his presentation is entitled Empowering Future Lawyers, Enhancing Human Rights Implementation Through Transformative Legal Education in Africa. He will share his thoughts with us in the next no longer than 15 minutes. Misha, thank you so much for being with us online, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Frans. Can you just confirm whether you can hear me fine?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Frans. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be here with you, albeit virtually. Indeed, as Frans said, I'm a senior legal officer at the court, where I am also the focal point on implementation of decisions. So looking exactly, trying to track how the court, its decisions are being implemented and creating some sort of an impact. And I thought indeed it would be useful to start off with some sort of a ground clearing exercise to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. And indeed, human rights education is something very broad. And especially if you look at international human rights, it can mean either the UN system, the international system, or indeed the continental level, which I hope the focus will be today, looking at the continental, the African Union bodies. But of course, they're not alone in terms of operating on the continent. We also have the regional systems, the ECOWAS, the EAC, SADC even. But then again, at the national level, which arguably is the most important, we have various initiatives or mechanisms, instruments, procedures that exist to ensure realization of human rights. So for me, I will only talk about the African in the sense of the continental level. And then when we're talking about education, I thought it was also important to delimit what we mean by that, or what we could mean by that. On the one hand, we can be talking about formal education, education provided through schools or training institutes, which self-identify in terms of training and educating. But then I also believe that education can be seen more widely, as in looking at education through the media, lifelong education, in the sense of knowledge transmission, the transfer of knowledge to someone, that it could also happen through conferences like this one, or books, journals, and all sorts of other awareness-raising initiatives, which for some might be categorized under the idea of human rights promotion and that sort of awareness raising, which in my view could also be labeled as education. But for the purposes of today's intervention and knowing the audience in the room a little bit, I want to focus on the formal education, and then specifically also formal education of universities, tertiary universities. So not talking about primary or secondary school education, where I do believe there should be a place for human rights education, but I'm going to focus on that university level.